Hey, this is Andrew Brown from Exam Pro, and we are looking at Azure Networking Cheat Sheet. This one's a two-pager, so let's jump into it. So VNets is a logically isolated section of the Azure network where you launch your Azure resources. VNet peering is when you connect multiple VNets so they act as a network. You have regional VNet peering, and then you have global VNet peering. Regional means between two VNets in the same region. Global, two VNets in different regions. Let's just define network interface. So a NIC is a software or hardware interface between two pieces of equipment or protocol layers in a network. In our case, it's going to be a software NIC for Azure, but NICs communicate in the IP protocol. And so for Azure, it's called the Azure NIC. And Azure Network interfaces are attached to Azure VMs. Without a NIC, an Azure VM instance would have no way to communicate on the network. An Azure VM instance has to have at least one NIC and can have multiple NICs if you want it to have it. For route tables is a table for data stored in a router or network host that lists routes to the next destination. By default, Azure creates a route table with default routes, also known as system routes, and associate them to your subnets. You can override system routes assigned to your subnets by creating a new route table and associate it with a subnet. Then there's the concept of an address space. It is a range of available IP addresses that you are allocating for your use within your VNet. The amount of IP addresses available is determined based on the CIDR range notation. For subnets, it is a logical division of an address space. A subnet needs a route table so it can have access. A public-private subnet describes whether a subnet is reachable from the internet or not. Azure has no concept of private or public subnets, and so it's like there's no formal setting of it. So you have to configure your own subnets to ensure they do not reach the internet. So it's not like you say private, you just name it private, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's private. You can associate an NSG to protect traffic entering and leaving your subnet. Azure has a special type of gateway subnet that is used for Azure Virtual Network Gateway. So if you want one, it's going to tell you have to make one. On to the second page. Azure Private Links allows you to establish secure connections between Azure resources, so traffic remains within the Azure network. So Private Link Endpoint is a network interface that connects you privately and securely to a service-powered Azure Private Link. It uses a private IP address from your VNet. Private Link Service allows you to connect your own workload to the private link. You need an Azure standard internal load balancer and associate it with the link service. Many Azure services by default work with private links such as Azure Storage, CosmoDB, and SQL servers. Third-party providers, should say providers. Third-party providers can be powered by Powered Link, okay? Or maybe it actually is. Third-party provides, no, it should be providers. Sorry about that. Azure Firewall is a managed cloud-based network security service that protects your Azure VNet's resources. It is a fully stateful firewall as a service, so FWAAS. They want to make everything an AAS, built-in high availability and unrestricted cloud scalability. You can centrally create, enforce, and log applications and network connectivity policies across subscription and virtual networks. Use a static IP address from your VNet resources, allowing outside firewalls to identify traffic originating from your VNet. Fully integrate with Azure Monitor for logging analytics. You can launch an Azure VNet in its own VNet, and other VNets pass through the central VNet. That's what you would do. You would launch its own VNet. You get Microsoft Threat Intelligence out of that, blocks known malicious IP and fully qualified domain names. Azure ExpressRoute creates private connections between Azure data centers and infrastructure on your on-premise or in a co-location environment. Connectivity can be from an any-to-any IP network, a point-to-point Ethernet network, or virtual cross-connection through a connectivity provider at a co-location facility. ExpressRoute Direct allows for greater bandwidth connections from 50 megabytes per second up to 10 gigabytes per second. And there you go. That is the Azure Networking Cheat Sheet.